The cost of transaction. Doing any type of business with anybody normally has an associated cost, and it's extremely difficult to not think about that. Most people go into every transaction really not thinking about it. Recently, I had an experience with a client where I had to travel not too far, but it was sort of to the next city, which is on the coast. It's a sort of coastal city. And this particular transaction seemed to go extremely well. Everything was working quite nicely. But about a day or two later, I could sense, and it was just the weekend, so it was like we transacted on the Friday. I think it was the Thursday. We transacted on the Thursday. And on the Friday, we spoke a few times, etc. But then came the weekend. And I started to realize that this client had suddenly kind of changed her mind about a lot of things. And I think her primary thing that she had changed her mind about was the fact that she realized the size, the complexity of the particular piece of business that we were talking about. It was a gigantic potential option, but she thought, well, this is people, it's staffing. There's all sorts of things that are involved. What I found really interesting, though, is that the cost of transaction became higher and higher. So what could have started off in being something quite efficient and effective and, relatively profitable, it could have worked out as a venture on a much larger scale. This particular movie project suddenly took on a whole new status, especially for this particular person. It became a much bigger thing, and they started communicating on the weekend. They needed assurance, and then more assurance, and more assurance. And I thought, the cost of this transaction is going up, and it's just becoming more and more expensive to be dealing with this particular client. The result of that was, I thought, this is a very difficult one, because you know what it's like with human beings. You don't want to negate or reject, or you have to do this very, very, very subtly. So what I thought was, I'm going to, again, I will toe my foot in the water and just see how this is going to pan out, because if it's not going to pan out very well, then it's time to resign this particular client. So I went through after the weekend to go and deal with this situation, this lack of a lot of things, I guess. Lack of self-belief, self-faith, lack of confidence, lack of ability to carry out what was meant to be carried out. And I thought, that is, why are they like this? Life is, things work out. If you just let them work out, they work out. But why this? Why this inability to actually switch and become big in your thinking? And I realized what I was dealing with was somebody that had never done this before, somebody that's never really placed themselves on a higher level, a higher level of thinking about business and about production and entertainment, and so it became a very, very interesting situation. It made me realize that I really needed to pay attention to the fact that this person had never done it before. Their genetics didn't have it in them to do this. You've got to be a big thinker a lot of the times to be able to tackle these kinds of projects. You have to be able to be a big thinker. But I spent about 3 to 4 hours with this client after that, just sort of putting them in a place where they understood where this entire thing potentially would go. Now, that 3.5, 4 hours was very painful for me, because I thought, it's just time. This is valuable time. I could be working on my movie trailer for my new project. There's all sorts of things I could be doing, but I had to sort of sit there and satisfy this situation. And it really made me realize that some clients are not worth having. They're really not worth having. And you've got to make that assessment up front very quickly, whether this particular client is going to be easy to work with or not. And if not, then you have to retire the client. You have to really make a plan to retire the client. It is very, very important that you be able to do that. People don't realize the effect of that. All too often we take on a client and we think, it's going to be okay, we're going to make some money out of this, etc. But that particular client erodes whatever profitability we're making, because they just suck up all your energy, your time, your everything. So not a good idea. Really, genuinely not a good idea to be taking on clients that you don't want to take on. The other thing too is that you need to sort of focus on larger and better clients. You need to sort of escape the little clients. You need to sort of corporatize, and then you need to go from corporates to publicly listed, etc. You need to sort of move to a higher and higher scales. And yes, those are not as easy to access and get, but you'll be surprised. If you have a mix, eventually the larger clients become the ones that are the most valuable to have, and the ones that enable you to actually make steadfast moves forward, real big leaps. So I think take that away with you for the day, that, decide and assess the types of clients that you are attracting into your pool of clientele, and stay focused on the kinds of clients that you should have. Stay focused on the sorts of clients that make sense to have, because the other ones are not that good. And you'll find that your profitability will increase, and that you'll be all the better for it. You'll be happier. And I think the main thing is this: is sometimes the job, and this is a very big trick or secret of ensuring that you don't have bad clients, is break up the job into lots of facets, right? So in other words, when you quote on a project, you may give them one amount, but make sure it's broken up into lots and lots of facets. That way, if something happens along the way, and make it clear, put a clause in that says that you can terminate the client at any stage, at any stage. And if you're getting paid up front all the time, then there's no risk to you, because at any stage you can complete a stage and that's it, and you can resign the client, and then there's no requirement anymore for you to concern yourself with having to complete the project. Now, I know that sounds horrible. I hate not completing projects. To me, not completing a project it's a terrible thing. You have to complete projects. But some clients get in the way of themselves so much that you can't continue to work with them. They are maniacal. Another thing too is, there is a point where it doesn't make any sense to work with that client anymore. So lose interest, purposefully lose interest. Don't show up anymore. Don't. I know this sounds awful, because it's not something that you want to do, right? But if, for instance, you've done what you needed to do to the stages that you needed to get to, and these are completed stages, clients can take whatever work you've done and they can take it to the next level. And if they still need the 2 or 3 final things that you should be doing, but they're really hard work, you're entitled to say to them, you've got to understand, you're absorbing a lot of my time and a lot of my energy, and I can't devote myself completely and only to you. I'm working with other clients, so you need to understand that your amount of time, and the time that you and I are spending together, is extremely high. It's far more, and my time is extremely valuable. And yes, I am being paid per hour, and I get paid in various ways. I've got royalty funds. I've got all sorts of income that come from projects that I work on, which is not hourly money. But I have to make it clear that my time is valuable, and it's not a la-di-da thing that I'm saying. I'm saying it genuinely is valuable. I have a certain pegged amount to my hours. I know what my hours are worth. I know what my hours are targeted at, and I know what I'm earning, which means I'm always trying to better that. And it becomes a thing where you have to be completely straightforward and upfront and make this clear. Otherwise, it turns into a nightmare. You know, I was at a party recently where a friend of mine said, he was dealing with a client that was just a nightmare, and he started telling me about this client, and I said to him, resign the client. I mean, just like if you were a nightmare, they would resign you. You resign the client. And he said the problem is he's stuck doing this thing and he has to complete it. I said, sure, I understand that, but did you break the job up into components? And he said, no, he didn't. He quoted on one project and that was it. And I said, well, that must change. In the future, put a clause in that says that all the projects are done in components. They're done in stages, in levels, and that each level is paid for up front, and that if the client at any time becomes onerous to the consultant or the person serving that particular account, that the company can resign the client. And I think, and when he heard that, he went, but what do you do in situations like this? I said, well, I do that very specific thing. I finish the project as much as I can, but if the client continues to be onerous and extremely difficult, very arduous to work with, somebody just not fun, and it's just not happening, it's just a very challenging situation, then what I do is I just absolutely resign the client. Just have to do it. There's just no way around it, because my time is too valuable and I don't want to waste time in situations where it doesn't actually make any sense to continue. And he said to me, how many times has this ever happened to you? I said, well, let me say this. In the entire history of all the businesses that I've had, there's only ever been one client that I've resigned, that I've actually not been able to successfully complete the project for. And interestingly enough, it was a situation where even to this day there wasn't an issue. And I'm going to mention it because we still have a great relationship, but it was one of the few times where we just physically could not complete that particular assignment. So it really does upset me. But again, and this happens quite a lot, there was a client recently, about 2 months ago, who was just not collaborative, extremely confrontational, not collaborative. Middle Eastern client, gentleman, extremely difficult to work with, absolutely no sense of what was going on, had no clue, kept asking for, refunds, and these are services that are done, completed, there it is, registrations in place, everything, and he just did not understand the process, and I kept wanting to resign him, and I was just at that stage where I was just about to resign him, and eventually it all came through and it all worked out, and there was a stamp of approval and all was fine. But it does come up, and in fact the reason why I have this in place, so I have these component aspects of jobs in place, etc., and for clients, is exactly because of the issue that I'm experiencing. I do experience this now and again. It's not often, but now and again, like once every 4 or 5 months, 6 months or 7 months or whatever, there is a client that is just intractable, extremely difficult to work with. And I've had to say very clearly, in my agreements, these are the terms and conditions of working with us, that you are collaborative at all stages, that you approve the process. Clients have this thing that, if they have to approve, they just won't approve. They won't approve a scene or a shot listing or a project or they just won't take it to the next level. And we say to them very clearly in our agreements that if they don't approve, that we then approve it on their behalf. In other words, if they are for whatever reason being unreasonable in their approval and they're not approving, that we are able to approve on their behalf. So it's a kind of a strange thing, because it's sort of like, well, the client should approve. Yep, true. But if the client is refusing to approve because they don't want to, pay, or they don't want to go to the next level, or whatever it is, you have to take the reins in your own hands, and you have to do what you have to do. So, yeah, take that with you.